Hello and welcome to this sneak preview of today's Age of with Digital series, taking place online right now, presented by Deloitte Analytics and AI Alliances. My name is Catherine and I am the Content and Community Manager for the Business of Data team here at Cranium, and it is my pleasure to share this special LinkedIn Live preview of today's event with you. This live opening keynote presentation is focused on the future of data and cloud modernization. We hope you can join us for all of today's fantastic sessions, which you can access by signing up on the link below in the description. My team are also going to pop it in the comment section for you as well. Now, without further ado, let's have a look at that opening keynote.
Welcome to the Deloitte Analytics Alliances event. My name is Ashish Verma. I am the US and Global Market Offering Leader for Data Analytics Modernization. And wherever you may be, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Since we all work multiple time zones these days, I figured we'd get this started. I figured I'd orient you to the offering portfolio, where this market scope of services resides and the things that you're interested in. So roughly about 2 years, almost 3 years now, we reoriented our business strategy and operating model to 6 distinct P&Ls, strategy and analytics being one of the 6. As you can see, the genesis of building a portfolio that vectored on strategy and analytics was so we could develop and deliver the full breadth of what we call advise, implement, operate. Think of this as the core component of a services portfolio when people buy strategy from us, and then a technology roadmap that leads itself to implementation. And more often than not, given sort of the breadth and scope of services that we do with disruptive technologies, people ask us to operate their platform for a period of time. It could be 2 to 5 years, up to 5 years, such that the breadth of the scope that they're attempting to accomplish gets put into place from a maturity standpoint. If you look at the analytics and cognitive side of the house, and you look at sort of the 4 distinct market offerings, data analytics and modernization is what I lead for both the US and the global firm. This is where we design, implement, operate large-scale data programs that in essence deliver to the mandate of what you think about as transformation agendas, be it digitization, be it cloud, be it AI. And in essence, what we're doing is developing a portfolio of services to get people to recognize the pivots they need to make when they encounter these disruptions. Intelligent automation is the scope of services run by Gina, where we leverage intelligent automation in the form of bots built on specific software to automate processes. AI insights and engagement run by Dave Cooter, in essence, is how do you build science-based capabilities, machine learning algorithms on AI platforms to develop and deliver the scope of services that lend themselves to data analytics. And Foundry, which is the net new add for this year, is how do you scale AI capabilities in an organization through a Foundry model, where it's embedded capacity for certain core capabilities in a storefront that lends itself to delivering to the AI mandate. If you look at the buyer profile and what data-driven themes they are buying to, I often get asked this question is this a growth agenda? Is it an innovation agenda? Is somebody trying to reverse their technical debt tied to sort of what they need, where they need to get to when you're talking about AI? Actually, it's all of the above. Data-driven themes manifest themselves very distinctly depending upon the role of the individual that we interact with. So if you were to think of a CXO, be it a CEO or a business unit leader that has the mandate for growth or innovation, they are the ones that are buying data-driven programs tied to a growth strategy, tied to decision-making around some very specific nuances by domain, be it supply chain, be it marketing, be it finance, so on and so forth. And the net genesis of what they're trying to bring to bear is how do you get the organization to pivot to being able to use data to drive innovation, whether that's innovation oriented to growth, whether that's innovation oriented to moving the needle in the organization to a tech disruptor like an AI or a cloud or whatever it may be. If you look at the office of the CIO, really the big mandate, and most of them have distinct titles now, which is just not CIO, but is Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Digital Officer. And it's very deliberate from the standpoint of the mandate that they have. Really, it is about how do you get rid of tech debt? How do you make sure that you can digitize the organization, modernizing the core, so that the core innovation themes of AI, ML, cloud can start to become the pillars on which they build and implement software and or programs, some of which lend themselves to delivering software-based data analytics and programs that we do holistically. The Chief Data Officer, much like the CIO, is buying data modernization, enterprise analytics, AI, ML, and data science enablement. Really, data, the title data and the Chief Data Officer, the mandate was not just processes and compliance, but how do you make data a competitive differentiator in their portfolio? And of course, we sell to the office of the CFO around finance and holistically finance modernization. So when I get asked, what is the buyer profile and what data-driven themes they're investing in, these are the things that come to mind. And what we talk about at the bottom is if you were to look at sort of, how do we do these from the standpoint of jointly investing with a client and or embedding resellers for the software agreements that we have, or how do we purchase legacy tech debt and lease it back so you can invest the sort of dollars that you need to invest these programs? Those are some creative investment options that the world of Deloitte has to offer. So let's double click and talk a little bit about my portfolio and what the sub offerings really are. 5 distinct sub offerings. The first one, data and analytics strategy. Really, this is about a 6 to 8 week exercise where we build the business case for transformation, usually lends itself to a TCO analysis and a roadmap that in essence is showcasing how are you going to start to pivot to the mandate or agenda that you're asking us to solve for, whether that's digital, whether that's cloud transformation, all of the above. And really, that's the trigger point or the buying behavior for how people buy pillars 2, 3, 4, and 5. Most of you probably know, cloud is the big story and big headline and has been in our portfolio for the better part of about 4 years. Here, we partner with the hyperscalers, be it AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle Cloud, Snowflake, to a certain extent, Cloudera, where we take some aspects of the workloads and make them central to a cloud-native architecture. So if you had a legacy Teradata appliance on-premise, if you had a legacy Netezza appliance on-premise, any other columnar RDBMS or store that needs to manifest itself into a cloud footprint, in essence, we build sort of the bill of materials for the cloud that you choose. Now, the question that I get asked is, do people have one cloud or 2 clouds? In reality, people have multiple clouds. And the reason why they have multiple clouds is if you were to look at sort of the different components of software that they run, whether it's a Salesforce or an Adobe Marketing Cloud, most organizations do have more than one cloud. So the strategy for building a cloud workload is to make sure that interoperability, the interaction between one cloud to the other, is paramount. So we do these scope of services. Data as a service is the genesis of how do you get the entirety of the data lifecycle management, whether it's master data management, whether it's data governance, whether it's data quality, whether it's lineage or metadata management, and deliver it as a service. I often get asked is, would you go do a project or a program for something like data quality? What really people are telling me is, look, data quality is not a project. Data quality is an ongoing effort in which somebody needs to do a one-time effort to get it to a certain threshold, and then make sure that as they continue to deliver to data quality, that a services-based outcome or an outcome that continuously remediates quality is top of mind. So when we looked at sort of reorienting the scope of services, we figured that there was a services-based outcome that was core to how this needed to be revectored. So if you come and ask us about data as a service, around master data, around governance, we often talked about the long-term picture of what does it mean for us to do this as a project, and what does this mean for us to do this as a services-based outcome. Which leads me to the fourth pillar, right? The fourth sub-offering, data analytics DevOps. So for the better part of about 4 years, I always heard about how come there is no DevOps for data. The features that lend itself to the attractiveness of making sure that, as you start to do development and you start to deploy things into production, and you have to do continuous integration, continuous automation, configuration management, build and release management, how come you guys have not built a scope of services that looks and feels like what traditional cloud development looks like right now, or for that matter, any application development? So this is the genesis of a services-based outcome that I'll talk about a little bit more in detail when we get into it, where we've oriented the DevOps capabilities to look and feel like what do we want to look and feel like. And last but not least, data in motion. This is where we are taking data that is streaming. So think about connected patient, connected car, connected customer, connected places, where because the ecosystem that they're orienting from is in motion, this data has motion. And that lends itself to very different architectures and endpoints for how we solve for that problem. So if you look at the above component of the portfolio, it should be evident to you that the data workload went to a central compute instance where we did what we needed to do with the workload and delivered the result. We don't have the luxury of doing that when data is in motion. A connected car, independent of 5G connectivity or high-speed network connectivity, cannot make decisions outside of the car, but the data originates from a car and goes to a central compute instance, and the result set is brought back. So it's evident to us that in these scenarios, some of these workloads need to be solved at the edge, at the device, in the car, to the patient, depending upon the use case. So the scope of services, in essence, is taking sort of the paradigm of data and analytics for when it needs to be solved at the edge, at the fog, in the central compute layer. So that's what the scope of services are. If you look at traditional columnar infrastructure, most of those are 10, 15, 20-year-old technologies that curated data sets. The cost of curation of their data sets, whether it was cost per terabyte or the amount of data that they needed to be built for, or the fact that they were built on legacy IT infrastructure where you could not separate storage from compute. If you ran out of storage, you had to scale up your box so that you got storage and compute. If you ran out of compute and you had storage, you had to scale up to the next class of appliance. These are all nuances of an outdated architecture for data workloads. Because in reality, in today's cloud native world, if you look at the segregation of storage and compute, and if you look at dynamic scaling, and if you look at sort of the things that people are attempting to do from an agility standpoint, if you're a data scientist and you're going to do a hypothesis-based experiment on data, and you start to run out of compute or storage, and the IT procurement function to get you the capabilities that you need, whether it's storage or compute or a particular piece of software delivered as a service, you can probably expect that you're not going to wait around for 6 months for that box to arrive, or for that storage to arrive, or for that compute to arrive. So in reality, if you look at sort of the genesis of what cloud is giving and the kind of challenges it's making people overcome, it's a very attractive proposition. So when we think about cloud and we think about accelerators to get you to the cloud, here is where we start to draw the parallels of the inadequacies of the legacy world and the benefits of the cloud for the future world. And we believe that we've accomplished that fairly successfully for all the logos for where we've done the cloud work. We have roughly about 87 migrations that we've done of this kind across the breadth of all of our sectors that are on AWS, GCP, Azure, Oracle Cloud to a certain extent. And we also bring to bear a set of accelerators through this journey, which shrinks sort of the timeline and the efficacy of using human middleware to do all of this automation. So we bring a decent amount of automation. And we have an automation that unbundles legacy code. We have automation that forward engineers legacy code. We have automation that tests this code. So the full gamut of bringing it to bear. And we believe that roughly about 40 to 60% of the effort estimate that you see in this traditional delivery goes away as a result of us having built this sort of automation. And we're fairly proud of that. And that's basically what the external analysts of the world, be it the Gartners, the Forresters, rate us pretty high around. So what can cloud unlock? I think elasticity to a certain extent, right? So if you need storage, if you need compute, of course, security, the very fact that, it enables you to buy sort of variable consumption as opposed to not paying for something upfront, but, metered services is the promise of the cloud. Of course, speed to market and clearly end user enablement, right? So lots of benefits. When we do the business cases for these kinds of things, we talk about what your goals are, what the benefits could be. And clearly one of the biggest benefits is reduced total cost of ownership. And of course, a centralized platform, one-stop shop where you can pretty much do some of the things you need to do. And of course, continue to be able to innovate at the pace you need to innovate, given the things that a cloud central footprint brings to bear. So let's talk about data DevOps. What is the framework and what does the services model for data DevOps look like? 6 pillars when we think about data DevOps, and they're concentric circles around the framework, and they lend themselves not from the standpoint of just holistic data management, but also things about how do you do data distribution, how do you manage your data pipeline that plumbs into this ecosystem, whether it's a daily processing, a weekly processing, a monthly processing, whether it's errors or issues management tied to that processing, whether it's reconciliation when you process this data, all of the above. So what this entails is these 6 pillars have what I call a Chinese menu item. And in reference to sort of, me using that analogy of a food takeout menu, is basically talking about how you can buy a specific outcome from a pillar relative to the scope of services. So let me take data infrastructure as an example for a pillar. When people ask us to come administer their data infrastructure, that's not all that they're asking about. They're asking us about administering the infrastructure. They're asking us about PaaS automation in that infrastructure. They're asking us about IaaS automation in that infrastructure. They're asking us about making sure that we can do configuration that looks different between a dev, QA, production environment. They're asking us to come size the bill of material for the dev, QA, production environment for the different pieces of software. So when I refer to, the reference to the Chinese menu, I'm talking about these scope of services that we then size as archetypes. So you can come buy an outcome for data infrastructure management as a scope of services where we will size that for you. And that's reflected at the bottom. So there's a services catalog against those 6 pillars. We figured out which platforms, which applications, which data assets apply to that services catalog. And then we deliver a services model for you, just like how you buy these services. So when you buy these services, you buy them relative to financial measures, and you buy them relative to performance measures. A performance measure is things like 99.99% uptime, a certain amount of defects, level 1 tickets, level 2 tickets, a certain amount of defects relative to migrating these things from dev to QA to production. That's what we're talking about. And then the contract structures for these are built fairly identical to what you've bought from a service outcome. So the services outcome for 6 pillars tied to financial performance measures, which is sort of the buying behavior. I believe it's a fairly competitive differentiator for us, and we are very bullish about, having brought this to bear for data and DevOps. All right, pivoting to data as a service. Like I mentioned at the start of this dialogue, right? When we looked at data as a service and we realized whether it's metadata management, master data management, data governance quality, data conversion migration, data architecture integration, and or data exchange and monetization, it didn't lend itself to project-based outcome, meaning we could not come and do a program or a project for you without a services-based outcome that continuously delivers to the mandates of these pillars. So what we've done is, even in this portfolio, we've oriented data as a service to be a services-based outcome for metadata management, services-based outcome for master data management. You may ask me, what does that look like, right? Clearly, in this world, a lot of it is domain-centric. So whether it's customer marketing domain, product supply chain domain, finance risk domain, or workforce compliance domain, it lends itself to outcomes that measure that. And of course, we have sort of the same core construct in here as well, where we talk about, the services that you can buy, and it looks and feels fairly similar to any services-based portfolio in which you could contract us for a specific data quality outcome against customer data or customer domain from the time we deliver a program or project to sort of what the target state you're attempting to accomplish. So if you curate first-party, third-party data for customer, and you're trying to get to 80 to 90% fidelity in that data set, we could contract to the range of starting at 80% and how do you end up at 95% if that's what you're shooting for. And we believe this is something that is also an ask that has been very evident in the marketplace for how this is going to evolve as we get to operate more and more of these things beyond just a project-based outcome. Last but not the least, data in motion. The one biggest thing that I get asked is, are you talking about IoT? Actually, I'm not talking about IoT. I'm talking about IoT and other things that transcend IoT. So if you were to look at sort of edge computing and see the very fact that AI chips is mainstream, right? So as you probably know, this is the year when there's going to be more than 750 million AI edge chips being shipped by the Samsungs, the NVIDIAs, the Intels of the world, where they're attempting to deploy these into sort of the sensor devices such that the workload, the data analytics workload, the workload can be done in the chip itself without it being transcended to a central compute function, where the edge device has the capability to embed an AI chip and communicate over a 5G protocol, speed and latency of a high frequency network to transport that data from the sensor to the device to the edge and eventually the central compute platform, is why we are calling it data in motion. And these market disruption drivers of AI chips, edge devices, the 5G network, and broader connectivity, the fact that you can connect a smart stadium, a smart car, or smart parking, smart retail, a smart factory, to the fabric of some of the things that we've been talking about all along, is what lends itself to why we believe this is the business that we're investing and building in this year. So what do the use cases look like? We think of it as three things. We think of the first set of use cases that we call connected people and their products as having a fairly distinct flavor, where it's not just the data that moves, the data and the asset move as well, like I described in connected car or connected patient. So what you have is you have mobility from the point of origination of that data set that you start to capture. You don't have the luxury of plumbing it back to the point of where you picked it up from, because the individual that's connected, either through a wearable or a surgically embedded device, or the car that is moved from where it originated the signal, is moving as the data is moving. So in reality, we're dealing with a use case in which the data moves and the asset moves. So we have to deal with time series data, geolocate coordinates on the data, the kind of vectors that the characteristics that these data sets have that were not evident when we just dealt with cloud, which is sort of the next tranche of use cases, which we call connected places, in which the data moves, but the asset does not move. So when we're talking about smart factory, smart stadium, smart parking, we see data move inside that smart factory. We see data move inside that smart stadium. So we still have the luxury of doing, depending upon the use case, either an edge workload or a workload that can lend itself to a central compute platform. So that's the difference between connected people and connected places. And if you look at the third tranche of use cases, which is connected operations, it resides in either a state that looks like the first state, connected people and their products, or the second state that looks like connected places. And here's why. When you start manufacturing in a smart factory overseas, be it China or any place overseas that you do your manufacturing, it looks like connected places, the second use case. Data moves, asset does not move. But the minute you take that product out of the factory and you put it on a container and you ship it across the globe, whether you do it by ship, you do it by air, it looks like the first use case. Data moves and asset moves. And when you offload it from the flatbed of a truck and you put it in the warehouse, it looks like the second use case again. So in reality, we're dealing with, if time were the vector and you had to basically turn around and say, what does this look like at any given point in time? It would look like either use case 1 or use case 2. So those are sort of the most complex for us to solve, because we have to solve for the characteristics of both sets of use cases. And what we've done is we've mapped roughly about 15 sectors that we have in our portfolio to these tranche of use cases. And these are the first set of use cases that we're beginning to mobilize. And the way we're beginning to mobilize this book of business is we've built the infrastructure capabilities on AWS, Azure, and GCP. GCP coming along, sort of a little bit behind AWS, Azure. And we've coded for the characteristics of these data sets. So think of it as if we need to do a handshake with 5G, the protocol. Independent of which hyperscaler that we build it in, we've developed the ability to ingest data from a 5G network, from a low-frequency Bluetooth network, MQTT protocol, you name it, such that we can handle the core characteristics of that data. The fact that it's streaming, the fact that we need to act on it when it's streaming, the fact that we need to basically sometimes do this at the edge when it's streaming, sometimes in a central compute platform, and send the action out to wherever it needs to be. So that's the last business. Very bullish about its growth as well from the standpoint of where it's going to head. And that sort of sums up, what the portfolio is. Thank you. It was great talking to you today. Great to see all of you as well. And I'm sure we're going to have interaction throughout the course of the day through this forum. And looking forward to the dialogue and spending the remainder of the day with you.
There we go. Thank you, Ashish. A round of virtual applause for you. Now, I hope you have gained some valuable insights on the future of data and cloud modernization. I know I certainly did. Now, we do hope you can join us for more of today's fantastic sessions, which you can access by signing up on the link in the description. And my fabulous colleague, Kim, has also included it in the comments as well. Head over now to watch more sessions live, and you'll automatically receive the on-demand access afterwards. I know there's a few of you that asked that in the comments. So yes, if you sign up, you will receive these on demand after. And to see the rest of the day filled with interactive networking opportunities, live Q&A, and some breakthrough discussions you really won't want to miss. So I'll see you over there. Thank you very much.